All right, Darrah, we are back at it again. Today, what is our topic?
Saying no. No means no.
I have to say, no means no, but this is one of the things you are really, really good about this. And I don't mean it in a weird, oh, yeah, you always say no. I mean, you have good boundaries, and that is really what this is about, right?
Exactly. No is really an opportunity for the better yeses for you and for the people you're saying no to present themselves.
Um, may I say that I have had to teach my children recently about no and what no also means in another way, although this does not go along with your no means no. But on the receiving end of the no, no sometimes means not now. That's what I always tell them. Sometimes it means no forever, and then you find a new way. But sometimes no means not now also. And I think that is, you have to be able to read the tea leaves on that.
I totally agree. And obviously, we're putting aside in a sexual encounter.
Oh, God.
No doesn't mean maybe, it means no. But that's not our conversation. Our topic is about with friendships, with business. When
Life.
someone says no, that might exactly be it. It might just be like, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed right now. What you're asking me is coming at the absolute worst time. And people don't often have the communication skills or the time to explain that to you. So exactly what you said, you've got to read between the lines a little bit and try and assess and discern, does this mean I stay persistent and follow up, or is my persistence going to be super annoying because they said no and I should have listened?
Yeah, and let me say this. You know my husband. He really does not take no for an answer in a business context. Or again, we're going to take that off the other context off the table. But do you know, this is the ultimate scrappy move. And I'm sure you can imagine him doing this. In 2004, he applied to business school. And it was the year of the total bust, okay? The economy was just in the crapper. And they had more applications. I don't know if that's changed since then, but that was a record year for applications for business school. Everybody lost their job and everybody applied to business school. And I got waitlisted at NYU and UNC. He got waitlisted at UNC. And I was like, I was on the wait list until the last possible day when they could accept you. And then everybody came. Usually they call, there's somebody, and I was at the top of the list, and they had assured me that, look, usually we have some attrition. They had no attrition. So I didn't get in. Instead, I went to St. John. That's
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. It was one of, and you can imagine, Darrah, because I have, confidence issues in a lot of things, but academically, it's never been an issue, right? I feel pretty confident about my academics. I'm a really big nerd. I had never been rejected from a school before. I'd never not gotten in.
Yeah, it's probably your first big rejection in life at that point.
It really was, except a couple months before this guy that I was like head over heels in love with also dumped me. But
you were in a little bit of a slump.
Why do you think I moved to St. John? I was like, I got to start over. That was my first entrepreneurial move. Moving to St. John was my first big entrepreneurial move because it was like, oh my gosh, everybody has rejected me. Life has rejected me. But anyway, so what Mark did was he called UNC and said, I see that you've put me on the wait list. How about this? How about I tell you that I will be for the class of 2005? I'm sorry, this was in 2002 that we applied because we graduated in 05. How about I will, instead of being for the class of 04, why don't you push me into the class of 05? And if you accept me right now, then I will drop off the wait list.
It's really smart because then they get someone already in and they get money in the door.
And they said yes. They said yes. He did not have to reapply. Guess what schmuck reapplied? Me.
Elizabeth
Schmuck. Elizabeth Schmuck took the GMAT again on St. Croix. I had bed bugs where I stayed. It was terrible. I could have done this, but I took no for an answer because I didn't even think that was a possibility.
Well, and Mark did the whole find a window when the door is closed, and he thought about working smarter, not harder, where you worked harder. And I'm totally the person who often does that as well. But the difference, I think, is Mark didn't get a firm no, or did he get a firm no?
I think that we all look at that as a firm no, but it's the point. It's exactly the point that you're making, is that in that particular window, they were able to wiggle room. Although all of us look at our no's as solid no's, right? So when you get a no from a university, when you get a no from an institution, when you get a no from a job, and a lot of times that is a solid no because they filled the position with somebody else or whatever. But he really found a very innovative solution. It's just an interesting one because I'd never heard of that before. It's one of the coolest stories that he has ever presented to me about his hustle.
Yeah, it's super badass.
It was totally badass.
That's pretty awesome. But it's interesting because you mentioned the job. And so if I hire someone and I tell the other candidates that the position's been filled, I would actually be, and no one has ever done this, really blown away if someone continued to stay in touch with me and follow up and would just keep me abreast of what they were doing, demonstrate their continued commitment to my company, and even tell me that they were open to positions if they came in the future. And not a single person has ever done that. So that would be a really great example, building off of the Mark example, of someone taking a no and keeping the door open.
Yes. And then we need to talk about some of the places that we come from when we say no. And I think when I say we, when is it okay to say no? First of all, it's always okay to say no, I think, is the first thing.
Well, yeah, I want to add to that because when people ask us to do something, we often feel like there's this obligatory response that comes, that because someone pops in your inbox or your phone or your text message or your DMs and they ask you for something, which generally means your time in some way, shape, or form, there's generally this reaction of, oh gosh, either I ignore it because I don't want to seem like a jerk, which can seem jerky in and of itself, and maybe they'll just forget.
I do that too, though, just because I don't know what to do with it. It's overwhelming, right? Like, it's like, because they're not the only one that has asked is the other thing, right?
Right. And then we're afraid that if we say no, what their response is going to be. Because often, and I have been this person where I can't remember if I've shared this with you before, that I said no, for example, to a woman out of the blue who reached out to me on LinkedIn. And she basically said, hey, you run the city's largest networking organization for young professionals. I'm starting one. You should promote mine.
What?
And those weren't her exact words, but that was the gist of what she said. And I thought it would be kinder of me to reply and be candid with her and just say, you know, we have a general policy that we can't promote other people's events because it's a slippery slope. And when we start promoting one, then we have to promote everyone's. So instead, we only promote our events and our sponsors' goals because they pay us to get in front of our audience. And I said, furthermore, if you want to come to our events and get to know our community and invite them there, you're more than welcome to.
That's really nice.
Thank you. Except her response was heinous. She wrote back to me something along the lines of, how dare you say that you're a networker and you're a generous person? I can't believe that you host these events and that you don't have the kindness to help me. And it was this moment where I realized that there needs to be a general universal understanding and commitment to the idea that you get to choose when and with and to whom you share your generosity. That just because I am a generous human, which I really try to be, doesn't mean I owe it to everyone to give to them on their terms when they want. And the irony on top of it was, I've never met this woman. And she thought I owed her this, that, and the other.
And without even saying, like, do you want to go for coffee? Can I take you out for whatever? You know,
which I have qualms with in the first place when it's a, hey, can I take you for coffee to pick your brain or get something from you? That's a whole other story.
Your brain.
Yeah, I hate that. But yeah, she gave no investment of trying to get to know me or demonstrate that she cared. It was really, let me transact and take something from you and then react poorly. And so I actually responded and I said something to her like, I'm really sorry that my reaction had you respond that way, because it was my intention to be kind and answer it and be sincere and transparent with you. But clearly it triggered something in you to make you upset, which frankly has really hurt my feelings, because I go out in this world trying to be fair and treat people the way I want to be treated. And I certainly didn't have to go through any of this. I could have ignored it in the first place, which I don't generally try to do, or I could have just left it at that. But I wanted her to understand that her words had an effect on me negatively. And she ended up backing down and saying, you know, I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have come at you that way. And we just kind of left it. And I felt glad that I advocated for myself and I spoke up and that I stayed true to what I believed was the right thing to do. And it has continued to teach me that I can only control my actions. I can't control other people's response or reaction. And while that's not always easy to stomach when you get a jerk like this person coming
Oh,
at
that's
you,
horrible. That's horrible.
it's really important still, I think, to live in that integrity of how you want to be treated and how you hope people will treat you if the tables were turned. And obviously, if the tables were turned, I really hope that I wouldn't have come at someone the way that she did in the first place, that I would have actually built a relationship first before asking for something, or been introduced, or found a way to get in a way that really felt sincere, unlike this. But can I share another story with you about how I was turned down and how it taught me so much about this?
I would love to hear that, since I just like laid it on the table how I was turned down and I just went to St. John and retreated into the world instead of, instead of hustling like Mark did.
I love that. So unfortunately, my story doesn't involve sun and sand. However,
Well, but now it does, right?
yeah, now it does. Now I get to live on this in the sun and the sand whenever I choose, which is my favorite and why I've designed my life that way and help others too. However, in this case, this was all digital. So I think about 2 years ago almost, I accidentally started this online movement called Give It Forward. And talking about generosity, it was this whole idea
I
of,
remember this.
yeah, it's this whole thing that I was doing privately for myself where I would take these 30-day stints and say,
Yes.
how do I give it forward to someone else, offer to be of service to them in some way, big or small, with no strings attached? And I would reach out to one person a day to do that. And by doing it, I realized that when you're intentional about it versus passive, which I generally had been, it really changes your framework where you're looking and seeking opportunities to be of service. It also really deepened my relationships with people, as well as helped me understand how much value I had to offer in ways that I really underestimated, like just listening or making an introduction. So these small things could really mean so much. And so I decided a couple years ago to post it on Facebook and just say, listen, I've been in a slump recently, and I realized that every time I take on this challenge for myself, it takes me out of it because I'm no longer focused on myself. I'm focused on others. And I said, who wants to do it with me? And within 24 hours, over 300 people engaged, and it continued to grow when we started this movement called Give It Forward. And everyone got on board, and we started a Facebook group and started talking about our experiences and challenges and all the beautiful things that unfolded. So shortly thereafter, I was listening to a Marie Forleo podcast or video, and Brene Brown was her guest. And they were talking about generosity and some studies that Brene had done on them. And I thought, wow, this seems really aligned. I'm going to cold email Brene and just tell her how much I enjoyed that and how this would be aligned. And this was something I was doing not for profit. It was just simply something I thought mattered and could really help people. And I thought maybe it's something she'd want to get on board with. And I got a reply from her, I think it was within 48 hours. And I'm going to read it to you.
Oh, you have it.
It's yeah.
Wait, can you explain who she is for people that don't know?
Oh, sure. Sorry, I'm a nerd in the self-development world, so I know all about Brene and others may not.
Of course, but yeah.
So Brene is a professor, I believe, at the University of Texas in Houston, and she kind of rose to fame with some viral TED Talks, initially on vulnerability and then on a number of other topics. And Oprah kind of adopted her into her circle, and she's become this prophetic thought leader almost on things of vulnerability and, other topics in that nature. And she's really excellent. She takes science and anecdote and she makes it really relatable. And she's just this person who believes in a lot of these basic human conditions that we often overlook, like being generous or vulnerable, in favor of the latest trend.
Except, let's listen to the email.
Right. So I get this email back and it says, "Hi, Darrah. Thanks so much for connecting. It is great to hear you have enjoyed Brene's latest interview with Marie Forleo. We appreciate you sharing about the social movement Give It Forward. In order to honor her family, research, and teaching commitments, Brene is unable to take on any additional commitments or collaborations at this time. We wish you wholehearted success on your work. Thanks again for reaching out. Kind regards, Teresa, Brene Brown's team." So I want to hear your first reaction, and then I'm going to tell you mine.
These form letters just drive me. I don't understand. First of all, it doesn't sound like it's addressing what you said to them. And second of all, I know what happened there, and I think that it really is it's very discouraging. I understand that she's busy, but she just basically typed something up and had somebody else send it to you. And I think that is really impersonal.
This is really funny because my reaction is wholeheartedly the opposite.
Really?
That's so interesting, and actually exactly why it's so important for us to understand how people are going to receive things so uniquely. So when I got this, first I was just thinking, that stinks. I really think this would have been a slam dunk, but I understand that my priorities are not her priorities. So I started dissecting it, and I thought, first, she replied, or her team replied, someone replied within a reasonable amount of time that was respectful. Because I think it's those things that if time passes and passes and passes, and 3 months later you get a response, it's like, okay, thanks for doing me no favors. But when someone responds within a day or 2 days, like she did or her team did, that felt respectful, and at least I felt acknowledged. So that was number one.
Wait, can I counterpoint that for a second? I'm sorry.
Sure. Yeah.
So, would you rather, and I'm thinking about myself because a lot of people write to me asking for help or advice, right?
Yeah.
And I am so overwhelmed with the email, and I've had to stop. I can't accept messages on Instagram because I have to pick channels, and you can't shut off messages on Twitter, but I have open messaging on Facebook, and then I've got email that people can reach me on. And I am so behind, and people are like asking me for career advice, and they're asking for all this kind of stuff. So oftentimes what will happen is 3 months after they send me an email, I will personally go through the emails, and I will offer them something. And sometimes I will say, I don't know if you're still interested, but I would be interested in working with you. Mm-hmm. So the question I have for you is, would you rather get a letter like you got within 48 hours, or would you rather get something 3 months later when maybe it's not quite as relevant, but the person's like, yeah, I just saw this and I'm totally into it. And then you
absolutely. But I think in a case like this, she was never going to be into it. So it was more respectful to reply in a reasonable amount of time and keep it moving. Was she never
going to be into it because she is closed off? Or
I have no idea.
Never going to be into it because of the idea?
Yeah, I have no idea.
The first thing.
I think it comes back to the boundaries, right? That like she has her own priorities, which again, she listed in the email, which I think is another key point that, Bernat's brand is so much around vulnerability. And while it's not deeply vulnerable to share that her priorities are her writing and her family and whatever the third one was, but that was a piece of her. But that was real. And at least it made it clear that, listen, this is what I'm focusing on. And that as another human who has priorities and things that they want to focus on, I could get on board with that and respect and say, listen, if someone has scattered focus amongst a million things and says yes to everyone's demands or questions or asks, no matter how sincere or possibly great it could be to collaborate or help them, they would lose focus on the things where they can make a bigger impact. So I was totally on board with that. And so who knows, maybe again, like to the Mark story, maybe one day we'll intersect. It's very great chance we will. We swim in a lot of the same circles. I'm actually potentially going to interview her at some point. That's come across my desk. So there will come a time, I believe, where we will meet and maybe something would come up. But timing is everything. And it wasn't for her at that moment. And so I don't think it would have sat in an inbox for 3 months and then she would have discovered it and felt like suddenly this is a priority for me. Whereas maybe for someone with a little less notoriety and public profile, maybe that's the case. But in this case in particular, I'd rather it either say, like in her case, she said no, but she never had to say the word no. It was very soft, but it made it clear that the door wasn't open and that they were very kind and friendly and saying like, we still wish you success. And they did name the thing that as though they really read the message. To your point of it was impersonal. It's impersonal in the sense that it's clearly a formulaic response. But they did at least say, here's your Give It Forward movement, and we appreciate that you liked that interview. So it gave me this demonstration of, okay, you respected it enough to read it and at least personalize the message somewhat. I think it's okay that I can look at it as it might not be a no forever. I'm not emailing her every week or every month about it because that's okay. This is not my primary focus either. I wanted to offer it as an option because I believe it's putting goodness in the world and know that she's about that as well.
So you feel like the no that you got taught you what?
It taught me to be really clear and respectful in my boundaries when people reach out to me too, because much like you're saying, where you get this inundation of people asking you for stuff, I get it too. I get it in response to my newsletters. I get it via my website, via every social media platform after I speak somewhere. And on the one hand, I'm really grateful for it. Because just like your work, I do my work because I want to help people.
Right.
And a lot of the reasons I do it in the nature and the formats in which I do it are so that it can be more scalable and that I don't I don't have to go one-on-one to everyone to give them the same value. It's why I write articles, so that if someone writes to me and I have an article that can be useful to them, I'll often just pull the article and say, hey, why don't you read this? This might be helpful. And then I don't have to go into more depth than that. And I've offered them some help. Or for you, if someone comes to you for career advice, that's a great time when if I were in your shoes, would say something like, hey, have you considered looking at XYZ person's work? They're really an expert on that. Whereas, I really try to focus on my focus of one, or whatever that is.
Right.
And not to say that you don't have value to add there, but it's a great way for you to pass the baton and send them somewhere that's valuable, which I don't think is your responsibility or obligation, but I think it's generous and worth it if you have the capacity. So to your question, what did I learn from this? I learned that saying no is totally okay, that you never have to explicitly use the word no, and that you can concisely and respectfully let someone know that this isn't great for you or it's not a great time, but that you support them and what they're up to and wish them well. And it can be as simple as that. It doesn't have to be long and tedious. You don't have to demonstrate that the door is closed forever, much to your point. You can leave someone feeling good with the interaction so that you still have some connection and relationship to them. Because frankly, you nor I would be in business if we didn't have people who cared about our work. And I don't want to shove the door in people's faces just because their ask is a little bit out of alignment with what my priorities are.
No, you don't want to be a dick. I mean, I think that's really what you're saying.
No, I definitely don't want to be a dick.
But I take something really different from that letter, and it's funny. I mean, it just depends. It really does depend on who you are, right? My thought about that is an eye roll. And your thought about that is like, oh my gosh. I mean, come on. Like, could you at least look up like the fact that I have something going here and maybe this could be something that's interesting. And, you've been screened out by somebody. And I find that I don't care how famous you are. A good idea and a good partnership's a good partnership. But then again, I just come from a very different place. I feel like, so I give you another example, which is that I used to be the research assistant to the CEO of Forrester Research. And I was responsible for reading a lot of his email and bringing stuff to his attention. And I would answer questions that I could answer. But things like that, I feel like he usually answered, depending on who it was. And I feel like for you, you've got enough of a following that I feel like she should have at least given you the respect of writing back to you and saying, yeah, now's not a great time, but thanks so much.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'd imagine they have some just general protocol of what gets through and what doesn't.
Yes.
But regardless of my following, I really want to believe that people should be respected regardless of their following or their track record. And so, it almost makes me feel better that I didn't get treated differently because I have a following and have celebrity contacts.
It's not so much that as much as, to your point, you might run across her again. And so, I mean, you got a good positive reaction out of it. But if it were me on the receiving end of that, I would give it an eye roll. I think that the lesson here, or what we're saying, is the way that you say no to somebody, whether it be personal or impersonal, also does matter a lot. So, but let's go back to the original sort of, what we were talking about, which is how do we say no in a way? Where is the no? So here's a good example. So I get asked to donate wine education sessions for charity on a weekly basis. Everybody wants me to donate something, and they want me to donate my time. It's exactly what you're talking about. I get hit up for literally everything all the time. It is maddening. It is really maddening because I am trying to make it, and per our other topics, I do not have the luxury of giving away my time right now. I've got 2 kids. I don't make a lot of money. Every event that I do really counts. So,
I'd love you to write that in your response.
Yeah, I mean, no. So people ask me for charity stuff all the time. So what I have done is I have said the following, and by the way, I will honor this if you're listening and you want me to do something. I have decided that there is one category of charity events that I will do. And if anyone asks me to do it and it's a legitimate charity, I will do it. And everything else is a no.
So what's that secret?
The secret is that if you do something for animals, If you're part of the ASPCA, you're part of a local charity, you're part of an international charity, I will do an event for you.
All right, folks.
There
Get
you
her.
go. I will absolutely, any day of the week, I will do it for pandas and sloths and certainly dogs. I'm happy to donate an online class. I'm happy to donate, I'm happy to be at the auction travel has to be included, but, things like that. But that is it, right? So that is one way to really focus in. If someone is making an ask of you consistently, you can draw a very clear boundary and just say, unfortunately, I get a lot of requests for blah, and this is the only category of stuff that I do. People are incredibly understanding about that. So I think that that's one. Do you have another example where you have said stuff like that before? Maybe you're not as rigid as I am.
Yeah, I think it's similar. I think it's similar to the Bernat example where she said, these are my priorities. You basically said, this is my priority and my boundary. And you've spoken that. And it's hard to argue against because it's yours and you're clear on it. So for me, I've often said things like, I'm right now focused exclusively on writing my book or whatever the thing is. And so anything else beyond that, I can't say yes to because it would be in disservice to you because I wouldn't be able to fully be there. And that's enough.
I feel like there's that. And then there's also the retrospective thing, which is, I'm sorry that I failed you in helping plan your trip to Napa or Sonoma, but, because I often give people advice, although they could go on the blog or listen to the podcast, to your point about that. And I do send them there, but I'm trying to get a book out, Yep. So yes, things like that. But I think there are some very clear lines in the sand where you can just say, I can't do this, or things like, I don't work on Sundays because that's the time that I spend with my loved ones, which I've also now adopted.
Totally.
You can send me an email on Sunday. I'm not going to get back to you because I have kids and it's like the one day of the week, sometimes Saturday, but I teach classes on Saturday evenings. Like I teach online classes. So I am working 6 days a week a lot of times.
Yeah, I think it's very understandable even without putting that that explainer out, that weekends, especially Sundays, you wouldn't be anticipating a reply.
You would be shocked at how many people.
I'm always shocked.
Right.
I'm constantly being surprised.
So how do you say no in person, Darrah? Here's a good question. Our conversation's all digital. What if somebody comes up to you at an event and says, "Oh, Darrah, you've got to come do blah, blah, blah."
Yeah, this happened to me last week, actually. I was having one of my Network Under 40 events, and we were way beyond the end time. Our events go till 9 p.m. It was like 9:40. The venue was pressuring me to get everyone out. And this woman walks up to me. I'd met her once in the past, and she said, "Hey, so can I pick your brain?" Which already I feel triggered because I hate the visual. I hate the question. It feels so takey.
I just saw a turkey vulture eating a squirrel outside of my house, by the way. Yeah. Isn't that what you think of when you see that? When someone
Literally,
says that?
I think of someone cracking my skull open with a fork and spoon. It's like the most vulgar, disgusting. And I get that people are coming from a place where they're looking for help, guidance, mentorship, which is great. So ask it differently. Say, totally. I'd love your advice, or what do you think about this? Like, people want to help, but they don't want their brains to be picked. Ew, so gross. So anyway, so she starts off in this already in a hole saying, "Can I pick your brain?" And she says, "I work for a nonprofit. I'm a fundraiser. And she said, "I know that you're really well connected. Who can you introduce me to in the corporate landscape of Atlanta who I can seek to help fund my nonprofit?" And I was just like,
whoa,
slap. Like I felt like I was like getting attacked because I'm thinking, wow, like that is a really big ask. Like clearly, like I mentioned, I met this person once. I don't actually know her. I didn't even know her first name. And she's asking me to leverage my reputation to make introductions to people who are very in demand and their schedules are very full. And not even that, but to ask for money. And I said to her very honestly, that's not really my strong suit. I said, a lot of my strength in my network is not in corporate America at the Fortune 500 level. So I said, I don't really think I'm the right person to help you. So that's how I said no. And then she pushed back and she said, well, then who do you know who could mentor me, who heads up development at another national nonprofit? And I said, Again,
Don't.
it's not fully my wheelhouse. And all the ones that I know in that role aren't in Atlanta. And she goes, well, where are they? I said, DC. And she's like, yeah, that's what I figured. And I just sort of said to her, listen, I know that guy over there who works on my team volunteers with a nonprofit. Maybe go talk to him and see if he'd be interested in connecting you with them. But beyond that, I'm sorry, I can't help you any more than that. And I felt like it was a soft way for me to tell her no. I didn't lie at any point. All of that was true. However, if it was someone that I felt came at me in a way that was less aggressive, I probably would have tried harder.
That's a really important point for people asking for stuff, is that maybe the first time you meet somebody, don't ask them. Maybe just try to send them a follow-up email or have a nice conversation with people and treat them like a human being.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing. I think the other thing is that on the end of the receiving end, it may feel you have the presence of mind because people ask you all the time to do this. But if you're not somebody who's used to being asked a lot and you feel pressured, the best thing to do is definitely to deflect. And it doesn't mean you can say, let me think about that. Or you can say, you can follow up with me if you want. 9 out of 10 times they won't follow up with you. The 10th time they will. And then it's easier once you're away from them to say, unfortunately, I really don't know anybody. Maybe you should look on, maybe start Googling some people and write them. I found that in the past that's helpful. Sometimes the process of saying no can feel like it's the whole owing people things.
Totally.
That's why people do it. They do it because they feel like or somebody makes them feel guilty or pressured. And I think the key to saying no and feeling okay is to alleviate the pressure on yourself, however you can do it. And a lot of times that's deferring to a later point in time when you can feel okay about saying no.
Well, the one caveat I want to say to that is I don't recommend leading people on to a later date to just kind of push the ball down and down the field unless you really think there's a chance you're going to help a little or that you're going to truly think about it. Because otherwise it's like a date. You're leading someone on saying, oh yeah, I'll call, or hey, follow up with me. But you knew you were never interested.
That's true.
But in a case like that, I'd say don't deflect and push it down the field. Like you could say exactly what you were getting to of, listen, like I really don't have those resources. That's not my wheelhouse, like I said before. The other thing too is you talked about this pressure, and without saying it, you talked about this reciprocity reflex. I think that's really important for people to understand that when we put ourselves out in the world, I call it the karmic retribution of giving, and I'm misusing very awarely the word karma. But it's this idea that I truly believe, and there's studies to back this up, thanks to my favorite Adam Grant, that when you put good out, when you do good, when you are generous, when you are a person of service, that it comes back to you. But it's not about one for one. It's not I do for Elizabeth so that Elizabeth, she'll do for me. And I keep a booklet and keep a tally of you owe me because.
Why don't you keep a booklet? I mean, the paintball, what about
because
all of
I would run out of pages. No, because I really believe truly that if Elizabeth helps me and I help Mark and Mark helps someone and someone helps someone, and then that someone will miraculously find their way back to Elizabeth, because that's how it actually works. And that's how I built my entire life and career. And I know from that experience that it is the truth. And I think there's a lot of people who, whether consciously or unconsciously, manipulate this reciprocity reflex, try to say that 10 times fast, without realizing in many cases that we have this natural ledger in our heads that someone helped me, now I feel indebted to them, or vice versa. And so while it's great to know that that's how people operate, and it's also what keeps this giving flow going, it's really important not to take advantage of it as the giver or the receiver.
No, and I feel like you've talked about this too before. Networking or asking things from people, I guess that I think about our initial reaction, how hard it was to meet you the first time, though those many years ago.
But you threw the ringer.
I know, but you know what the thing is, Darrah, is that I actually didn't, when I met you, I just wanted to meet you and know you. And so I think that's why it worked out okay. I mean, I knew that you were connected, but I didn't care once I met you.
Right, which is why we hit it off. Like people can feel when someone's trying to take from you or they're angling. And you know that feeling. It's the worst.
It sucks.
No one wants to feel that they're really just a pawn in someone's game. So when you demonstrate that you care enough and you give a damn to get to know someone truly, or if you're coming to them because you seek or want help or guidance, that you've done your homework and that you're respecting their time and their work, that goes a really long way.
You're creating a relationship, which is something, again, I think you say all the time, is that people are more likely to say no, and to say no aggressively, if they feel like they're looking at this as something transactional. I mean, you just said that. And
Yeah,
I think,
exactly. Relationships over transactions, long game over short game.
yes, it's that is what I was trying to say very ineloquently that you just said. It is about the long game. And also, like, who the hell do you want in your network? Do you want people who are crappy? And then when you get a no from somebody who is in your network or who's a friend, then it feels a lot better also. Like if I called you up tomorrow and I said, Darrah, I need a contact, blah, blah, blah. And you were like, I don't know anybody there. I'd be like, okay, she doesn't know anybody there.
Right.
But if I called somebody else, like I might feel more out of the blue. It might feel worse to get the no because you don't even know why they're saying no. I mean, it goes back to actually your example in a way too, because you don't even know why that she said no to you, Bernat.
Yep, totally.
So
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on all of this, that the people that I want in my network are people I truly enjoy being around. It has nothing to do with the gain I might seek from them or the possibility of what doors they can open for me, because I just truly know that the people you know and love are the people who will open doors for you. And that there's a lot of depth behind someone's Rolodex or LinkedIn connections or otherwise that I'm not going to understand or know ever, if not for a long time. And it's not about that. Like life is way too short to be stockpiling the limited number of people you can really stay in contact with, which according to Dunbar's rule is about 205. So if I'm going to stockpile those people, but that's in different facets. 5 is your inner circle, 50 is the ones that you're actually in like somewhat regular touch with, and then the outer circle of 150 are the ones that you have really loose connection with, and beyond that it's just your connections on social media basically.
I can barely keep the 5, I'm telling you. I mean, like I've got,
I know, I'm like number 7 and it's bleak out here.
Oh, shut up. It is look, I am holding on for dear life with my children. That's all I can eat.
Hey, I mean, that's real. You have 1, 2, and 3 in your house.
Yes.
So there's not a lot of room.
So you're lucky to be number 7.
I'll take it all day long.
No, but seriously, when I think about social media also, so a lot of Wine for Normal People has been built on social media. 99% of Wine for Normal People has been built on social media. Why is that? Because that's the situation I found myself in when I was in Atlanta and I couldn't make a local business run. I became more nationally known. And what I have found is that the people that I communicate with regularly on social media, who I a lot of times eventually wind up meeting in person, are absolutely people that I want in my circle and I want in my community. And even though hopefully my community will grow, I hope to keep that same kind of network going. Those people, when I do say, it's the same thing. When I say no to them, they know that I actually mean it. It's not that I'm being jerky. I just don't have the help to give them. And when I can offer them help, I do. So I think that we've sort of come full circle from saying no. And what does saying no mean? Saying no means setting boundaries. Saying no can mean not right now. Saying no can mean the way that you approach the person was not appropriate. Saying no can mean you didn't take time to build a relationship. I think ultimately, I feel like the theme of all of our shows is that the better that you can suss people out, make sure that they belong with you in your tribe, the better off you're going to be. Because then you won't have to have a lot of those uncomfortable conversations, and those people will leave you. They won't be your friends anymore. They won't be, it's like the Jen thing. You got to get rid of those people. It doesn't matter whether it's in social media, if you have a business. It doesn't matter whether it's a client. It doesn't matter even, by the way, if it's a family member. That's what I think.
Absolutely. I mean, the public service announcement version of my finale here is that we really just need to give people the benefit of the doubt and be a little kinder to them, both when we're saying no and when we're receiving no, just to understand that we all have a lot of shit going on. And because it's your priority doesn't mean it needs to be someone else's. So allow people to say no, because when someone asks you a question, they're allowed to say yes, maybe, or no. That is their choice, not yours.
And also, you are allowed to say no if you feel like that is what you need to do. Do
Absolutely.
not feel that you have to be the yes person all the time.
Yeah, saying yes that much is not a service to you, and it's not a service to the other people that you're saying yes to.
The benchmark for nice, if you're worried about that, is not how often you say yes. It's how you treat other people.
Yeah, you can be nice and still advocate for your own boundaries in a kind way. You know, it's interesting. I'll say this before we conclude, had a conversation with Guy Kawasaki recently where he talked about how he generally comes from the perspective of yes, which I think is great, meaning that you're not just looking for reasons to say no, but that doesn't mean that he doesn't say no if something doesn't fit what really works for him, what his priorities are, what his values are, his 4 kids and a wife at home. So he said his specific example was, if you invite me to speak at your conference in Croatia and he lives in San Francisco and it's for free for an hour, his answer is no, because he doesn't want to fly across the world and spend 4 days to help you boost tickets for your conference for free to him with his 4 kids sitting at home. So I have total respect for that there probably would be a conference in Silicon Valley that he'd say yes to because that's his backyard. And there might be a reason why he'd be happy to say yes to that for free versus the one across the world. And so for him, he feels very malleable starting from this place of yes and saying no when things don't really align with his values and priorities.
I think that is a good conclusion. Make sure that you watch out for yourself and still be nice to people.
I feel like we need to do one of those, like, the more you know musical.
Oh my God, One to Grow On. Do you remember those? You probably don't.
No.
All right. Okay. Well, for those of you who do remember, NBC, One to Grow On. And now we'll get in trouble for copyright. Okay. Well, thank you guys for listening. And until next time.
See you then.